and welcome to Wrestling at Random. I'm Jeremy Deemer.
And I am Adam Summers, and you are in Season 4 of the podcast, Wrestling at Random. The randomizer, as it always does, picks from tens of thousands of shows, and that's literally true. That's not an exaggeration. And it went off the board in a way that I always appreciate, as we have an episode of All Japan Pro Wrestling Television from the summer of 1998 here to review on the podcast. It's also interesting in that it's one of the few TV shows, and we've talked about this before, it's one of the few TV shows that was a 30-minute show at this point. Not a 60-minute show, not a 90-minute show, not 2 hours, or God forbid, in modern days, 3 hours on Monday nights. No, this was a 30-minute wrestling television show.
It was not enough, but we'll get there.
Yes.
But you had, like you mentioned, we are in Season 4 of this podcast. If you are a new listener, first of all, thank you for joining us. If you are a continued listener, thank you for supporting the show and continuing to come back and listen to us and stay subscribed. The way it works is we take all of the internet's wrestling content, we throw it into the randomizer, we fire it up every single week. And this year, Season 4, it's bursting at the seams. There's so much content in there. You mentioned the thousands and thousands of hours. We fire it up. The randomizer says you're watching this show this week, and this one, you're right. It went all the way to Japan for All Japan Pro Wrestling Television, July 19th, 1998, and this show was taped. One of the matches was taped on the 15th, the other on the 19th, for airing on the 19th. The first match that we'll talk about on this show was taped at in Osaka in front of 3,200 fans.
Yeah, so Osaka Prefectural Gymnasium. If you're a modern fan of New Japan Pro Wrestling, you've seen many shows from this building, some classic G1 shows. The attendance is estimated at 3,200. So if we're going by modern capacity, if it was the same capacity back then, that would mean this is only about a half house here on the 15th. Main evented by an All Japan World Tag Team Championship match, Akira Taue and Toshiaki Kawada, the Holy Demon Army, taking on Gary Albright and Yoshihiro Takayama, a shooter team of sorts, having competed recently in recent years prior to this in UWFI. Yoshihiro Takayama having fought in the Kingdom promotion the year before. But there are other matches which we will not see here on this show. Quickly run them down. Now, Hiro Hoshikawa, who I was surprised to see was in All Japan all the way back then. I remember him being a really exciting wrestler in 01 in the early 2000s prior to him suffering a head injury. Teaming with Super Delphin to take on and defeat Kentaro Shiga and Yoshinobu Kanemaru, who modern New Japan fans would certainly be familiar with. Satoru Osaka and Tomoe Honda defeat Jun Izumida and Masao Inoue. We should know that All Japan in the 90s, like, it was very, very highly regarded, and rightfully so for the top of the card stuff, but the lower card stuff, very missable. You were not missing out on much of those matches did not make TV.
It's the opposite of 1998 WCW.
Yes, exactly. We then had All Japan World Junior Heavyweight Title League match, a match I'd love to see, only went 6 minutes. Yoshinari Ogawa, who is still active and wrestling at a championship level in Pro Wrestling Noah, All Japan's spiritual successor, right now today as we record this, defeating Tsuyoshi Kikuchi. We've talked about several times on this podcast before. Such a great, fiery underdog babyface against heavyweights. Here he's against his generational junior heavyweight rival. Giant Kamala, Haruka Aigen, and Masanobu Fuji defeat Giant Baba, Mitsuo Momota, and Rusher Kimura in another sort of one of those legend kind of nothing six-man tags that makes the fans happy, but not a lot happens. The Headhunters, listed as A and B, which I always enjoy, defeated a young Gato and Chado in 11 minutes and 8 seconds.
Me want that match. That had to be ridiculous looking and
Yes.
super fun.
Yes, just for the curiosity factor alone and the size difference. We then move into the higher end part of the card as it's Johnny Ace, Johnny Smith, and Wolf Hawkfield, which if you're a Sega video game fan back in the day, you may recognize Wolf Hawkfield as the name of a character from Virtua Fighter 2. They did a promotional tie-in with All Japan Pro Wrestling. Wrestler Jungle Jim Steele became Wolf Hawkfield. He was the wrestler from the video game as a wrestler, so he rounded out that Foreigners trio. They defeated
teaming with the Johnnies.
Yes, teaming with the Johnnies. Defeated Jun Akiyama, Maunakea Mossman, who we'll get to more on him later, and Royal Rumble veteran Takao Omori.
Sounds like fun.
Yes, we then had semifinal Kenta Kobashi, which, by the way, if you're watching this show, you can see that I am wearing my Kenta Kobashi shirt in honor of this of us reviewing this show. Kenta Kobashi defeated Masahito Kakihara, a shoot-style wrestler who you may remember from the early to mid-2000s in the junior heavyweight division in New Japan Pro Wrestling. That then takes us to the match that starts off this half hour of wrestling television. Akira Taue and Toshiaki Kawada, like I said, Holy Demon Army, maybe the greatest tag team of all time, taking on Gary Albright and Yoshihiro Takayama. This is a Takayama relatively early on in his pro wrestling career, at least in terms of what people who would know him to be later. Most notably, he has black hair, not the bleach blonde hair.
Yeah, we did review a few matches from Takayama's career, including some early matches without the blonde hair, over on our bonus feed, our bonus content. That's available, patreon.com/wrestling@random. It's also available if you're an Apple Podcast subscriber, right there in your podcast feed. It's marked bonus content. You click on one of those shows, you hit subscribe, it unlocks all of those bonus contents, including an episode where we do a deep dive, a listener requested episode where we learn a little bit more and enjoy some of the pro wrestling stylings of Yoshihiro Takayama.
Yes, and we have to be, by the way, if you have not yet subscribed, we've got to be upwards of 100 episodes in the bonus feed at this point that, like you said, you subscribe and it immediately unlocks all of those. We've talked so many times about all the different things there. I'm sure you'll mention that before we close out the show. I did want to just talk about, as this match is joined in progress, sadly, as this
yeah, don't just blow over the All Japan theme song, sir.
Well,
before we get into this match,
I assumed you already played that for the fine listeners, as we can never resist playing the All Japan Pro Wrestling intro theme music. Hopefully playing
it's happening now. It's about to happen now.
There you go.
Best. It's one of the best songs.
But, one of is inaccurate. It is the greatest theme song in the history of professional wrestling television shows, undisputed. I know there have been a great many, but nothing compares to that. Just the majesty of it. It puts a hop in my step. I am ready for the pro wrestling action when I hear that. Unfortunately, as we said, the pro wrestling action is joined in progress, as we have only a half hour of wrestling here. The All Japan TV show had been an hour long, had been reduced to a half hour. And then, as we've talked about on previous episodes, we've gone into all of the particulars of how All Japan then not really became, but how All Japan split, with most of the top wrestlers, with the exception of Toshiaki Kawada, going to the Mitsuharu Misawa-led breakout group Pro Wrestling Noah. We're just a few years away from that, but right now still, Giant Baba is still alive. All Japan is still going strong as is. There's no signs of the cracks that would form a few years later. We join the match in progress, and Toshiaki Kawada is kicking the big, burly, singlet-clad Gary Albright. So Kawada is doing Kawada things to start this match.
Yeah, he starts out by kicking Albright in the face, and I'm like,
Yes.
all right, we're under Kawada's here. We're underway.
Yes, we are. Albright responds with a punch. Kawada hits a big running kick, tags in Taue, who immediately gets suplexed by Gary Albright. So I feel like we already know exactly what all these guys are doing. If you're not familiar with Kawada coming in, you know he kicks hard. If you're not familiar with Albright coming in, you know he throws awesome suplexes. And so we're off and running. Takayama tags in, and he does Takayama things. Some big knee lifts, a side rush and leg sweep straight into a cross arm breaker. But Taue, doing Taue things, just comes in and dismissively steps on Albright's face, or excuse me, steps on Takayama's face to break it up.
Yeah, I loved when he's trying to put on that arm bar, that cross arm breaker there, and Taue kicks him in the head to escape.
Yes.
That was great. We get strikes from Taue, including a slap that echoed through the arena and got a big reaction from this crowd.
Yes, Taue is such an interesting guy in that, there's the four pillars of All Japan Pro Wrestling, that being Misawa, Kawada, Kobashi, and Akira Taue. Like physically and athletically, Taue cannot hold a candle to the other three, but he's such a smart wrestler and has so many interesting quirks that as time went on, became such staples with the crowd and got such great crowd reactions that he can more than hold up his end of the bargain. We've seen him in a previous All Japan, I believe it was a half-hour TV episode, or maybe it was just a one-match show that we did for the Patreon, that really fun Triple Crown match that he had with Misawa. Kind of the same thing where you look at him and you're like, who's this smaller, kind of gangly, giant Baba looking guy? And then you get 10 minutes into the match, you're like, oh, it's Akira Taue. He's freaking awesome.
Albright in to illegally break up the Taue chokeslam attempt. Takayama follows it up with a bunch of knee strikes to the abdomen of Taue. And Taue is down, and I think he got low blowed here in this action.
Yeah, that was the accusation from Kawada and the seconds in their corner, including Takawa Mori. We then get a leg kick battle between Takayama and Kawada, which I think that's what a lot of people are waiting to see, just judging by the crowd reactions. They wanted to see these two guys going at it and kicking the hell out of each other. Eventually knock each other down, back up. Awesome forearms from Kawada. But Takayama hits those huge knee lifts, including a knee lift to the chest that lifts Kawada off his feet and onto the ground. We then have a bit of ground and pound from Takayama here in 1998, and the crowd is unhappy. So is Takawa Mori. He's up on the apron screaming at Takayama. So even though both Albright and Takayama have been wrestling in All Japan for some time by this point, there is a bit of the feel of All Japan home guys against shooty outsiders, which we've talked about in previous episodes. Always creates a great atmosphere. We've got a little bit of that here with these two teams.
Albright in with a now hurt Kawada. Power slam by Albright. He knocks Taue off the apron. We get a double team with Takayama, leg drop to Kawada. Albright then power bombs Kawada, but Taue's in to make the save. He knocks down both Albright and Takayama. Kawada tags Taue in legally this time, and we get a DDT by Taue for a 2 count, and an ooh from the crowd.
Yes, Taue then goes for another choke slam, his Nodawa Atoshi, which is basically it's a choke slam, and he's pretty much the one who created it. It's funny though, you see Taue, and we talked about it even back to the early 90s, doing his version of the choke slam. The only guy that I ever have seen in the U.S. do the choke slam the same way as Taue is, of all people, Razor Ramon Scott Hall.
You're right. Yeah, you're
remember,
right.
In the early 90s, he started using that. It's the same thing where it's more of like a takedown, more of like a judo throw with a throat hold rather than a big, giant big show choke slam. So an interesting, you wouldn't necessarily think there are too many parallels between Akira Taue and Scott Hall. But here we are. He goes for it, but Takayama cuts him off with a big boot, hits a big boot on Gary Albright as well. Albright then throws Taue off, hits a mean lariat and a huge huge release German suplex on Taue. Takayama tags back in, and they hit a double suplex on Taue.
We see a sleeper on the mat by Takayama, but Kawada breaks it up with a kick.
A nasty kick to the back. Takayama then with a Cobra twist, but gets thrown off.
The abdominal stretch by Takayama and it includes grinding his knuckles into the ribs of Taue.
Yes.
He gets free, but Takayama right into an armbar on Taue. Kawada breaks that up with a jumping knee to Takayama.
Kawada has the best saves, the best pin breakups. Like, see a lot of guys run in and just kind of dive and shove a guy or get like a light stomp. Takayama comes in, it's like, I'm going to kick your back to where it goes out to the front through your chest, or I'm going to hit a jumping knee drop. He gets his money's worth on these saves.
Kawada tags in. He does his quick kicks to the head and then running boot to the face in the corner.
Also, it's an awesome spin kick during this sequence before hitting that running boot in the corner on Takayama. We then have there's a block of a backdrop driver by Takayama, and he hits more big knees. They start trading big boots, and then out of nowhere, Kawada hits a huge dangerous backdrop driver and a gamengiri, which is basically, if you're not familiar, an enzigiri to the face, meaning a gamengiri face kick, enzigiri back head kick. I will say that I prefer the Kawada gamengiri, and also the we see in modern times Taichi using that, as well as the descendant trainee wise of Kawada. Give me 1 million of these before I see another junior heavyweight hitting a rope-assisted gamengiri in the corner before hitting a springboard.
All 4 men are in, and they double suplex Albright. Kawada with his submission hold on Takayama.
Yes, the stretch plum, which is the modified dragon sleeper, where you have the arm captured as well and do a twisting motion, a great submission that not enough people really have ever used in the U.S.
Kawada with the jumping head kick to the head of Takayama. It's blocked, but Taue hits a kick to the back of Takayama's head. And this time, Kawada hits his kick to the front of the head, and Takayama is down. Albright would.
Sorry, go ahead.
No. And then Albright came in to make the save there.
Yeah, so we get a choke slam back suplex combo by Kawada and Taue on Gary Albright. This was awesome. Running big boot by Taue on Albright. Gamengiri by Kawada on Takayama. And that's it. Kawada and Taue get the win. We saw about 10 minutes of action here. On the screen, it says it was 19 minutes and 51 seconds. So we saw about half of this match. But what we saw was pretty damn awesome.
This was awesome. Yeah, and yeah, these guys had a great match together. It was the different styles like you described at the top, but just what a team. You talked about them being potentially the greatest team, and Kawada and Taue showing off their skills. This was the main event of that show, was the tag title match. So this went on after a Kobashi match. Yeah. So so this was this was great stuff. Even in edited form, it was a really good match.
Yeah, it was very, very good. And it's just indicative of how great 90s All Japan was, and that we always talk about, 6-3-94, you talk about, all these legendary matches. But every time we've had one of these random episodes of All Japan TV, or when on the bonus content a single match has been picked from this era, almost always it's not been of a show or of a match that's considered one of the legendary greatest of all time matches in All Japan. And the matches are still always great. Like, that was just the
standard.
Yeah. Now, when I use the word casual, I'm not saying that guys weren't working hard, but there's just sort of like this level of casual greatness that was almost always in place for big matches on All Japan shows in the 90s. And this certainly held form. Like you said, this was from July 15th of 1998 in Osaka. The second match on this show, which we'll get to momentarily, is from the 19th. Before we get there, though, we come back from commercial and we see very chopped up, but awesome to see here, Riki Choshu versus Jumbo Tsuruta match from the mid-'80s in very clipped form. We've got the classic.
I got all excited. Because we come back from this and I see Jumbo Tsuruta, who's one of our favorites on this podcast. And I'm like, oh, I wasn't expecting. I didn't know we were going to get a Jumbo Tsuruta match on here. And we did not know. It was just highlights is all it was. It's
an awesome match, though. This is from the time period where Choshu had just left New Japan. He came into All Japan with a bunch of other guys, and they had this sort of like fake promotion set up that they actually did several events for. They actually ran shows under this banner of this fake promotion to basically really build up the idea that it was Riki Choshu coming in as an outsider from another promotion taking on All Japan. This was Choshu against Jumbo, and two of the biggest names, maybe the two biggest names outside of Antonio Inoki in Japan at this point. The crowd was red hot. As a quick aside, when the pandemic first started and I was just trying to find any wrestling to watch to pass the time, one of the things, in addition to us starting this podcast, one of the things that I did was I started going on a deep dive of 80s All Japan, because I had not seen anywhere near as much of that, unfortunately, as I had of 90s. I had seen things here or there, but I never made a real effort to do that. And this is one of the matches that I watched in full. Watch this match go to a full time limit draw. Great stuff. And we see just a little bit of that here in very clipped form.
Yeah, no, it's highlights. You see the jumping knee by Jumbo. You see Choshu putting on a Scorpion Deathlock. And like you mentioned, the heat for this was insane. People were losing their minds for this match. We saw a superplex by Jumbo. Choshu with a running lariat. He puts on the full Boston as the bell rings, and we hit the it looks like was it a time limit draw for that match? Yeah.
Yep.
So yeah, just the highlights I saw of this, I'm like, ooh, me want to see more of that match. That looked great.
Yeah, so you talk about forbidden doors, and that's what this match, you could tell, felt like to the fans. This was not something they ever thought they would see. They're getting to see it. The action is great, and they're reacting appropriately. We then go to a commercial of sorts, previewing and promoting the fact that Kenta Kobashi will be defending the Triple Crown Championship against Jun Akiyama coming up on July 24th at the Budokan. And we see footage from backstage area of Kobashi, his heavily bandaged knees. You see in-ring action of his knees being worked over. We also see a young Jun Akiyama looking like he was auditioning for a Japanese reboot of Beverly Hills 90210 with him playing the Brandon Walsh character. That's the only way I can describe Akiyama's look at this point.
So dreamy is the way you describe it.
I would say a bit of a dreamboat. I mean, even the haircut, the highlights, he just looks like he's he looks like he stepped off the set of a Japanese version of 90210. Maybe there was a Peach Pit in Tokyo that he was hanging out at.
Potentially a Peach Pit after dark. Yeah.
Yes. Yes, exactly. That's what this looked like.
We did get some we also got some Misawa clips in here.
Yes.
Which I was very excited about. And then you mentioned the clips of Kobashi. We see him killing a dude with a lariat. Yes. And I'm like, oh, well, I could go for a montage of Kobashi killing dudes with lariats. This is great stuff. So just some more clips before we roll into the main event of this show. This is from, you mentioned July 19th. This was 2,950 fans in front of for this match. And I looked it up in the Wrestling Observer newsletter. Dave Meltzer reports that at this point, Kenta Kobashi is working with both knees that require surgery.
Yes.
But with Misawa out of action until late August, this is July 19th, remember, he's unable to take any time off. And so he would have this match and follow it up with that match against Jun Akiyama.
Yeah, it's crazy too, because like this is 1998, and then so much of what you said echoes what would happen into the 2000s, into the mid 2000s with Pro Wrestling Noah and Kobashi or alternatingly Misawa having to carry the ball further than they should have on serious injuries. The other thing that to me is noteworthy, and we'll get to it when we talk about the Budokan show after this, is how many times All Japan didn't pull the trigger on Jun Akiyama winning the Triple Crown. And really getting him up to that level of the four pillars that we talked about. And then even that continued at points into the mid 2000s in Pro Wrestling Noah as well. You think back to
but still Akiyama now at the time of this recording celebrating his 30th year.
Yes,
so
still going strong in DDT now as we record this after leaving All Japan Pro Wrestling, still having big matches against top opponents. And when you look at the other guys from his era, granted he came a few years later, but how broken down those guys got. Obviously the tragic passing in ring of Mitsuharu Misawa years later. But yeah, it's just, I remember at the time, again, you were 16, 17 years old when this was happening. It was very hard to get All Japan tapes unless you were like in the tape trading circles. But even at the time, just like reading the magazines and being able to see shows here or there, just thinking like, when are they going to pull the trigger on Akiyama? It was so great right out of the chute. We'll get to this main event here, and then we'll talk about what happened on the 24th. I did want to mention a few of the other matches here on the 19th. We won't go through all the random pointless undercard matches, but we did have the finals of the World Junior Heavyweight Title League with Yoshinari Ogawa defeating Satoru Asako to win the championship. We had the All Asia Tag Team titles, which were sort of a secondary tag team championship in All Japan. This isn't a perfect comp, but think U.S. tag titles. We had Johnny Smith and Wolf Hawkfield defeat the Headhunters, Headhunter A and B, to retain
Sounds
the
like a miscarriage of justice there. That's
to retain the All Asia Tag Team Championships. We had a similar match from the match on the 15th, as it's Akira Taue and Toshiaki Kawada. This is a non-title match, but they defeated Yoshihiro Takayama and Masahito Kakihara. And then that takes us to the main event. No titles on the line, but this is the main event of the show. This was sort of the final outpost, the final preview tag, whatever you want to call it, as it is Jun Akiyama teaming with Hiroshi Hase, which it will always be weird to think of Hiroshi Hase in All Japan. He did spend several years there and had some big matches, but it's just, you always think of him so much as a New Japan guy.
Especially because of our formative New Japan watching years being those early 90s shows with Hase it is one of our gateway Japanese wrestlers.
Absolutely. Teaming with Kensuke Sasaki against the Steiner brothers at the first WCW New Japan Super Show pay-per-view, which, as you said, influenced so many people, including us, becoming fans of Japanese wrestling. But here it is Akiyama and Hase teaming up to take on the team of Kenta Kobashi and Maunakea Mossman, who would go on to be more well known as Taue. He had a cup of coffee, I believe, in MLW, but a guy who was in All Japan for a long, long time. One of the few guys, along with Kawada, as we mentioned earlier, who did not make the jump when Pro Wrestling Noah was formed. But yes, here, so we've got that outpost of sorts, Akiyama and Kobashi facing off on opposite sides of a tag team match to main event this half hour of All Japan Pro Wrestling TV.
And they're in first. It's Akiyama and Kobashi to start. Big chops by Kobashi, but Akiyama immediately cuts him off with a dragon screw to the injured knee of Kobashi.
Yes, the camera zooms in just before that on the huge brace and pad on Kobashi's knee, and the announcers are talking about it using the words in English, weak point. So in case you weren't aware, you are aware now that Kobashi is coming in very injured. Akiyama, as you said, catches a kick, hits a dragon screw. Kobashi is immediately selling the knee, although who knows how much it was even really selling at that point. Akiyama stomping repeatedly on the knee. Kobashi is trying to fire up. Akiyama is yelling at him to do just that and hits more running kicks to the injured knee.
Yeah, I loved when he's kicking the knee of Kobashi, but Kobashi just keeps getting up and he keeps coming towards him.
Yes.
This was just badass. And then yeah, hooks on uh, a full Nelson, and he's just kicking the knee of Kobashi. You get he you get we skip ahead here. So
Well, before that, I want to make sure you don't miss this. Well, yeah, maybe this is coming up after the big spot. We've got the running kicks to the knee, and then Akiyama runs into an overhand chop and a big half Nelson suplex. Hase comes in and he gets the same treatment, half Nelson suplex. And so, yeah, Kobashi, kind of the story of this is he's hurt, but if he gets a hold of you, whether it be with strikes, chops, lariats, or if he can grab you and suplex you, you are still in serious trouble.
yeah, Akiyama landed right on his head on that suplex. Looked brutal.
Which I mean, if you're looking at a comparison or a difference between like the first half of the 90s and we went into the second half of the 90s in All Japan, the drama was still there in matches, but the drama also became more and more of one-upping, crazier and crazier and crazier head drops. And we are definitely in that era of 90s All Japan right now, and that series of half Nelson suplexes certainly tells that story.
Hase getting kicked by Mossman. Kobashi comes back in. We get a double shoulder block, and then a power bomb by Kobashi. Misses a strike, and then a Saito suplex by Hase.
Well, yeah, Kobashi goes for the lariat. Hase catches him and hits his beautiful Uranagi. It is by far the best version of this move you'll ever see. The way he arches his body, like it's artwork in human form. The only guy who's ever come remotely closest, and it still isn't as good, but the way Switchblade Jay White does the Uranagi gets maybe about 70% of the way there. But yeah, for my money, even more so than the Northern Lights suplex, which is such a beautiful move, the Uranagi from Hase is just as visually appealing of a suplex, of a wrestling move as you'll ever see. Akiyama then tags in, goes for the running, jumping knee in the corner, but Kobashi just throws him off dismissively.
Swats him away. Swats him away. This is great.
And again, Uranagi, another parallel here, but think the way when Samoa Joe catches a guy coming at him in the corner and just slams him hard down to the mat in one motion. This is kind of a proto version of that here from Kobashi.
So he swatted Akiyama away, and Akiyama answers right back with a drop kick to the knee to hurt Kobashi again. He puts him on the top rope, and Akiyama hits a dragon screw, pulling Kobashi off the top rope with it.
One of those moves that I love, and also one of those moves that was perfectly animated in No Mercy, in its Japanese counterpart. One of the more visually appealing and satisfying moves to hit in that video game, and I would imagine here for Akiyama as well on the injured Kobashi.
A half crab, but Kobashi makes the ropes.
Can I be pedantic here?
Yeah.
I hate this version of a half crab or a full Boston crab, the Samoa Joe version, where instead of hooking your hands and your wrists around the ankles and leaning back, you just grab the opponent's leg or legs around the knees and lean back. I just always think it looks so bad. There's no way you would get as much force and as much leverage on that as you would on the traditional version of a half Boston crab or a full Boston crab. So I've never understood why.
The only reason why would be if you're gonna put that on and then show that it's slipping down to the ankle and you're still holding it on there and then getting to the ropes. You could.
I feel like no one ever does that.
But nobody does that. Nobody does that. So.
The only way that it would be acceptable to me is exactly what you described. And then as a result, the wrestler applying the hold transitions into an STF. If you do that, that's fine. But if you're just holding a guy in that, when I'm watching that, all I'm thinking is it's so easy to get out.
Drop kick to Kobashi, who's laying on the ground. I love a good drop kick to a guy on the ground. Akiyama then hits a T-bone suplex on both guys.
Yes, the exploder, the signature suplex of Jun Akiyama. also of Yuji Nagata around the same time. But yes, hits a couple of those, tags in Hase. We get a double running drop kick to the knees of Kobashi, which was awesome. I can't remember ever seeing that before. A double running drop kick, basement style, one to each knee.
Hase puts the Scorpion Deathlock onto Kobashi. Mossman kicks the hold free.
Oh, before he kicks the hold free, Kobashi is legit doing push-ups while in the hold before trying to get to the ropes. As you said, Mossman comes in, several kicks and a jumping back kick, finally breaks it up. Mossman then
in All Japan, which I love, just touching the guy doesn't break the hold.
No.
It takes a few strikes to break the hold.
Yes.
Which is something that I think should be brought back to modern wrestling here.
It's almost like we talked about before with All Japan referee, legendary ref Kyohei Wada. You can't just get your fingertips on the rope. You got to get a full grab on that rope to get a break. If you don't, he will kick your hands off the rope.
He will kick you off the rope because you didn't do it with enough force. It's not
a manly enough rope break. It's to justify a release of the hold. Kind of the same here with saves. Mossman then tags himself in, hits a big top rope drop kick. We then see more kicks from him. Hase is in. Hase hits, and I like this because this to me is an homage of sorts to his former tag team partner. He hits the Kensuke Sasaki style running face crusher, hair bulldog, whatever you want to call it. I enjoyed that.
Yeah, and Hase also hits a Frankensteiner.
Yes,
on Mossman, and then Hase. Then you get a giant swing to Mossman, like 20 times.
Yes, like full 20 rotations. I counted them. This was one of his signature moves. This was the thing the crowd was waiting for in this match, other than seeing Kobashi and Akiyama battle. He does the giant swing, 20 rotations. The crowd counts along with each of them. This was awesome.
All four men in the ring. Kobashi gets put into the Tree of Woe.
Well, first, Kobashi gets in the ring and immediately gets drop kicked in the knee by Akiyama. Pinpoint accuracy and laser precision on the strategy from Akiyama. As you said, he then puts Kobashi in the Tree of Woe, and they hit a double flapjack on Mossman, and then another double drop kick this time on Kobashi to his face while he is in the Tree of Woe.
Hase hits that Northern Lights suplex on Mossman and gets the 3 count. Akiyama continues to attack the knee of Kobashi.
Which I should jump in, by the way, and say that double drop kick in the corner in the Tree of Woe, that was to the knee, to the injured knee of Kobashi. So almost literally every single piece of offense that Akiyama and Hase unleashed here on Kobashi some 5 days before the big title match, everything was focused on the knee. And like you said, also in the post-match.
21 minutes, 53 seconds was the actual time of this match. We saw, obviously, a clip-down version.
Yeah, about 8 minutes of the 22 minutes here.
They were pushing Akiyama, working Kobashi's knee as a setup for the July 24th singles title match at Budokan between the two guys. The storyline is that that Kawada was a good sport and didn't go out of his way to attack Kobashi's bad knees, but that Akiyama, who's never won the Triple Crown, has said he'll do whatever it takes to win his first singles title, and this whole match was to weaken the knees going into that match.
Yes.
They packed a ton into this 30 minutes. There was a ton packed into it.
It was for 24 minutes without commercials. Like, this felt like an hour TV show, and I mean that in a good way. We had 2 really entertaining matches. I mean, really, the first match was just great. The second match was entertaining and intriguing. It was really just almost like an extended angle in match form to set up the main event on the 24th. I do want to just mention briefly the show on the 24th, sell out at the Budokan. And when you look at this card, it's clear that they did not need to waste any other big matches really to sell out the Budokan at this point in the 90s. If you had a Triple Crown match that people cared about and people were excited about, I mean, I'm not going to run down the whole card, but I mean, even you get into the last 4 matches and they're not really really huge matches by any stretch. Johnny Ace, Johnny Smith, and Wolf Hawkfield against Giant Kamala and the Headhunters. Gary Albright and Yoshihiro Takayama against Taue and Jun Izumida, a match with an obvious pin eater in Izumida. Hase and Mossman against Takao Mori and Toshiaki Kawada. 25 minutes. I'm sure it was good, but not a match that, had a whole lot on the line. Unless, you're looking at Hase and Mossman winning that match to then get a tag title shot down the line, but still not a marquee match. And then the main event, a match that has a incredible rating on Cage Match, a aggregate of 9.36 based on 72 votes, a 4.5-star match in the Wrestling Observer newsletter that, if you are accounting for inflation, would probably be a 5.5-star match now. Kenta Kobashi defeating Jun Akiyama in 32 minutes and 50 seconds to retain the Triple Crown.
Yeah, that sounds awesome.
If anyone, by the way, if anyone is a patron or wants to become a patron and wants to find that match and choose that match for us to watch with them being the intentionalizer, we'd be more than happy to do that.
That's a great idea. I love I love that idea. That's one of the highlights of being a patron and a subscriber over at patreon.com/wrestling at random. There, not only do you get all of those bonus content episodes that we said, just subscribing for 1 month unlocks the whole back catalog, hundreds of episodes, and then you have the opportunity to be the randomizer. You can be, we call it the intentionalizer, where you go and you tell us a show to watch. That'd be great if you pick that match. We would watch just a match. We would watch an entire show. We'll do what we can here over there. You can just go ahead and sign up. Just signing up to be the intentionalizer, you get all the back catalog and your pick of what you want us to watch for that month. So a ton of stuff going on there. We also have shirts available, Patreon exclusive shirts available over there as well. So again, patreon.com/wrestling at random. And of course, we've done a bunch of other All Japan shows here in the free feed as well. Yeah. So make sure that you're subscribed to this podcast. You can go back in the back catalog to previous seasons where we've done other All Japan, New Japan, some other, no shortage of Japanese content here in the free feed, but a lot more in the bonus content, if you can believe it as well. So go for it. If you enjoy what we do here, that's the best way to support the show. If you can't support the show financially at this time, we understand that as well. But we do know wrestling fans know other wrestling fans. So the best way to support the show in another way is to tell your wrestling fan friends about the show. Show them how to subscribe to the podcast, and continue to spread the word about the podcast. Leave us those 5-star reviews. If you want to leave us anything less than a 5-star review, you can tweet at us, but do not leave those.
Yes.
Leave only 5-star reviews. I don't understand who those people are that would leave anything less. So go ahead and support the show in any of those ways. If you want to interact with the show, like we mentioned, Twitter is a great way to do that, at Wrestle at Random. The same for Instagram, at Wrestle at Random. Facebook.com/wrestling at random as well. We have an email, wrestlingatrandom@gmail.com. And all of those links, the entire back catalog, everything I described is available to you at the website, wrestlingatrandom.com.
You know what I'm disappointed by, Jeremy? Given the fact that we review wrestling shows from the 90s, the 80s, even further back, it's really shocking that people cannot communicate with us via fax.
No, it's we have not fired up the fax line.
We should people should be able to call 1-800-COLLECT and listen to the show that way.
Yeah, and with that, we are going to wrap it up. We're going to call it a podcast for this week.
But let's say before we do, favorite and least favorite things on this show. I know it's only a half-hour TV, no promos, but yeah, I guess favorite and least favorite things.
Yeah, we can do. It's hard to pick a favorite because this is just like jam-packed 30 minutes of awesome. Like everything on here was great, but Kawada and Taue doing their thing is always great. Seeing anytime I get to see Kobashi in there with this young up and coming Akiyama was fun. The story of that match was great, and so I you could go with any of those things as the best thing for me. I can't limit it to one individual moment, I don't think.
I would say least favorite thing for me is the fact that All Japan was only a half-hour television show on a
Sure,
weekly basis at this point.
clipping down the matches is probably my least favorite thing in the show.
Just because we know that just from seeing the second half of each of these matches, how good the rest of it was. Maybe as good as all the in-ring stuff was, and it was very good, I think my favorite thing about this show was the video package leading to the main event.
Sure.
Seeing how seeing Kobashi injured, seeing Akiyama going after him, kind of seeing the story leading into that for a half-hour TV show with no promos, obviously not in a language that either of us speak. This did a tremendous job of making me want to see Kobashi versus Akiyama and making me think as a viewer that Akiyama, both in terms of him being a great wrestler and then Kobashi being injured, making me think Akiyama has a legitimate chance to finally win his first Triple Crown.
Yeah, I think I would have preferred. I think I would have preferred this show if we just had one match for the whole thing. We've seen those All Japan shows before where they do one match edited down for the entire program. That might have been better.
Event the have this match get to see more of that. Have a little bit more of the video build up to it. Not that the opener. The tag title match wasn't very good, but it may have been even more effective that way.
And that's about it. With that, we're going to wrap it up. So, Adam, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you, Randomizer. I'm always happy when it throws me a big audio nightmare style bone, and we get some classic Japanese wrestling here on the podcast. A good palate cleanser of a show, and looking forward to what the Randomizer brings us next week on season 4.
That's right. We will give the Randomizer another spin. We'll be back next week. And for those of you who are just listeners to the podcast, don't forget we also have a YouTube video version of the podcast. So previous seasons have all been audio only YouTube broadcasts. Starting here in season 4, we've added the video version of the podcast up there. So go ahead and give that a try. Go ahead and give that a don't touch your subscriptions to the podcast. That's you will always get the episodes first in the podcast feed. But we're now rewarding those folks who have been with us quietly on the YouTube channel that we never promoted. We are supporting them now by giving them actual video content instead of just audio only. So go give that a look, give that a check out as well. So that's search for Wrestling at Random via YouTube. You'll go right to our channel. And with that, we're going to call it a podcast. Thanks everyone for listening, and we'll talk to you again next time.